This is a Film Stories original podcast.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm delighted to welcome back a friend of the podcast, Robert Sellers, who has written, he's written several books right now. We're going to talk about several books right now. He's written a huge number of books in the past as well. I urge you to go and visit our past episode. But today we're going to be talking about two of his new books. Principally, the first one is The Search for Bond, how the role of James Bond was lost and won.
I think from a writing point of view, won and lost. It's weird, isn't it? Actually, why those two? It works better won and lost rather than lost and won. I don't know why, but it does, doesn't it? So some words and some ways of putting words work better than the other way around. Yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly, and we couldn't be talking about this at a more sort of auspicious time because, of course, we are in a point of exactly this transition. But my understanding, did you write this book a little while ago, or
I did actually. It was, if anybody knows my book Battle for Bond, which came out in 2007. Which caused a bit of a stink and continues to do so because we're trying to get a reprint of that going, and we are being thwarted by lawyers. But there we go. So and that was quite a success within the Bond world, and I was sort of continually asked, are you going to write another Bond book? And I was sort of umming and ahhing, and then I thought, well, if I'm going to do something that hasn't been done before, so I came up with this idea of because we all know as Bond fans, don't we, all these actors that were almost Bond. And I touched upon it in Battle for Bond as well, when McClory was setting up his Thunderball. He wanted Richard Burton and people like that. So I thought that'd be an interesting idea. Whether it would be a book, I wasn't sure whether it would actually be a book rather than maybe a magazine article. But the more I researched, and I started getting interviews, started doing interviews with people like Sir Ranulph Fiennes and people like that, and getting some great stories and anecdotes. I thought, no, this would make a book. So I started writing it very soon after Battle for Bond and did a lot of interviews, actually. The bulk of the interviews in the book now are from people I interviewed back in 2008, because some of them have since died, people like Michael Billington. So yeah, luckily I started then, because as I say, a lot of people I spoke to had passed on. So, but no, I couldn't find a publisher. No one was interested, which didn't really surprise me because it's quite specialised. I wish there was a publisher out there who just publishes Bond books. I'll be okay.
What is your relationship with Bond?
I've always been a Bond fan since childhood. I remember my earliest memories of going to the cinema was to see Bond films. We all have memories, don't we, of the first films we saw, because I think less so now, because I think the romanticism of cinema's gone, hasn't it? I think you go into this huge car park kind of structure, and it's like 7 cinemas. And you're hunting down cinema 6 or something, and there's 3 seats in it. I think the romanticism's gone. But in my day, sort of late 60s, early 70s, going to the cinema, you go into these huge auditoriums and the curtain would part, and it was quite an event. It was an occasion.
There was a reel of adverts, and the last advert was always Westler's hot dogs available in the foyer. And it was sort of black and white footage of cowboy scenes and stuff. And as it finished, the curtains were always halfway closing.
Yes, they always came, yes, for about 20 seconds. And yes.
Yeah, so you'd actually see it projected on the curtains. And that, for some reason, was another whoa.
It would open up, wouldn't it? It would open. Well, do you know the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? The opening of that, you have a curtain, and the credits are on that curtain as it rises. I think it was all about performance, wasn't it? It was all about a show, wasn't it? Because in the early days of cinema, you'd have a show, wouldn't you? The singers, dancers, the organ. And I think that carried over. In the 60s and 70s, there was still this element of the cinema manager saying, let's put on a show. But now they just, it's like a factory, isn't it? Like baked beans. So, yeah, those memories of Bond, going to see Bond. I remember Dr. No, Goldfinger, Double Bill.
And also Bond films were on television at that.
That's the thing. And there was no video, no streaming either, goodness me. So, yes, And that's why it was such a big thing when Bond was on TV, because again, with no video, you had to be in, and that when it I remember being really distraught when a Bond film was on and it finished, because you knew you would have to wait another year and a half for the next one to be on. It's fantastic, and Christmas was amazing as well. We had all these big films that came on at Christmas, because again, no video, so. Towering Inferno, Great Escape. These were the only times you could see those films, and they were. It was an event when they were on the TV. It made. It was a great time to grow up, actually.
I kind of imagine your favourite Bond must be Connery as being your sort of first. Yeah.
I remember refusing to go. I was 13, 12. I refused to go and see Spy Love Me. In 77, I refused to go and see it because I must have seen Live and Let Die. I was so disillusioned by Golden. I like Golden Gun now, but my young self must have hated it because it was so awful, and I refused to go and see The Spy Love Me. I saw the reissue and I really liked it. But yeah, I was very pro Connery as a kid. But now I look back and I love Roger. I think Roger's great. But yeah, no, Sean was still. There was something about him. It was perfection, wasn't it? I mean, he was. A lot of people I spoke to who were up for Bond in those early days, people like Michael Craig I spoke to, and various other people who all said, it was great going to do the test and the interview and talking to the producers, but I'd ask them, do you regret not being Bond? And they said, well, it was Sean, wasn't it? It had to be Sean.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument that sort of runs through your book, really, that almost both before and after, people who don't get the job afterwards, it's like, I couldn't have done what Connery did, so what was...
I think some parts are... Because there must have been hundreds of kids up for Harry Potter, for example, but Daniel Radcliffe had to play Harry Potter. There was no one else. There are some roles, there are some parts where if the actor's not there, you sort of have to invent someone else, don't you? Because the timing was perfect, wasn't it?
There's also an argument, I guess, that the Bond we know today wouldn't be Bond if it hadn't been Connery. It wouldn't be that. Yeah. Would it have survived 2 films, 3 films?
Well, also the thinking was, well, thank God for what I said in Battle for Bond. If McClory had got the Bond films up and running, I don't think they would have succeeded. It had to be Broccoli and Saltzman, and the fact that you had 2 American producers, well, 1 Canadian, 1 American, altered the choice of actor. If it had been a British producer, I think they would have gone down the David Niven, Trevor Howard route. They would have gone for a public school, English public school type actor. But because it was Broccoli and Saltzman who had one eye on the American market, they wanted sort of a pulp paperback actor kind of thing. You know what I mean? Someone who could appeal to the American market, a sort of ballsy kind of almost anti-hero, I guess, where I think a British producer would have gone for a sort of middle class drawing room type actor with a sort of a clipped British accent, So that's why they looked for sort of a working class actor, I think. And also at the time you had the kitchen sink genre, didn't you, happening? The John Osborne Look Back in Anger stuff, and you had this emerge. I wrote a book called Don't Let the Bastards Grind You Down, which was about that generation of working class actors: Finney, Terry Stamp, Kane, Burton, Harris, O'Toole, this Alan Bates. You had this wonderful generation of working class. Connery was involved in that as well, of course. At that time, I think that kind of working class actor was very trendy. So it sort of captured the zeitgeist, I think. It captured the 60s, didn't it? It was perfect for the 60s. Because 62 was still very much 1950s in Britain, wasn't it? I remember for that book interviewing Richard Harris's widow, and she said when living in London, even in London, it was all very drab and grey, even in sort of 60, 61. She remembers going to America with Harris, and it suddenly turned into Technicolor. Everything was bright and colourful. Britain was very drab. So I think Bond was sort of the launch of the 60s, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, it was kind of a bridge to it. I mean, this was...
I think was it the same day that Dr. No premiered the Beatles' first single was released, and 2 days later, The Saint came on TV. So it was sort of...
Oh, my God.
The 60s began, yeah. It was the start of the 60s, wasn't it?
There was a great book by John Higgs, which is Live and Let Love.
Oh, yes. Is that coincidence, or is that some divine plan? I don't know. Those are the two things, Beatles and Bond. that was it, wasn't it, for the rest of the decade? They were the two biggest things ever culturally. Those were the two titans of the '60s, weren't they? Culturally, Bond and the Beatles.
Well, arguably, even today, if you go to a tourist office for London or for promoting Great Britain, Beatles, Bond, Shakespeare, the royal family, it's those are the icons that.
But isn't it amazing that the two cultural icons, world icons, not just in the UK but world icons, arrived within 10 hours of each other? Just one in the afternoon, and then Dr. No opened in the evening. It's astonishing, isn't it, really?
Were any of those early Bonds that the people who were interviewed or were in the casting process, because of course they searched far and wide for potential.
They really did, yeah.
Were there any of those that you thought, oh, okay, well, that's, in an alternative universe, I would have liked to have seen Dr. No starring
Patrick McGoohan? I think McGoohan would have been terrific. I think of all the actors around that, well, Burton would have been fantastic.
You can imagine Burton saying, "You've had your 5."
Absolutely. Well, I say in the book, some you can visualize certain actors in sort of the train fight in Russia with Love with Robert Shaw. You can see Burton and Robert Shaw going at it, can't you? And you can see McGoohan in there as well. You can't see Niven or Cary Grant, really. So, yes, McGoohan, because I thought he was a terrific actor. He had that sort of unpredictability, didn't he, McGoohan, if you watch Danger Man? The sudden violence that can occur, which Connery had. Roger didn't. I don't think any of the... Daniel Craig, I suppose, has got it. This sudden... The beast can suddenly break out of the dinner jacket, and sudden violence occurs. Yeah, I
think that's a really good point. There's a scene in Quantum of Solace, which I think is a much underrated film, where he just waits for someone to bleed to death. He sort of checks he's got literally his finger on their pulse, and he's waiting for them to bleed out. And I think, wow, that's Connery level brutality right there.
I mean, that happens in more sometimes. The famous one is him kicking the car off the cliff, isn't it? But the one for me, the one thing element of Moore's performance where he's the most vicious or the most sort of nonchalant in the way he's dealing out violence is in Spy Love Me with Jaws, when he's got Jaws on the magnet over the shark pool, and he just looks in the water and flicks the switch, and down he goes into the shark pool. It's really nonchalant because he's basically sending this guy to be eaten by a shark. So I thought that's always that is quite cold.
The tie flick as well. Do you remember that in Spy Who Loved Me, where the guy's holding on to his tie and he just flicks it out of his hand, and that's a really good bit of violence because it is kind of in keeping with Moore, sort of like his sartorial elegance and everything.
It's very flamboyant in a way, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. I wonder how much of that was Roger, or because I know he complained about the kicking the car, didn't he? He didn't really want to do that. And it was John Glenn saying, look, this blah, 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 this guy's really, he's just killed your friend, blah, blah, blah. But how much that was Roger?
Connery comes on after this huge search and after several false starts, including like TV and radio Bonds that you bring up, Bob Holness from Blockbusters and Barry Nelson, who later appears in The Shining as the hotel manager. It's a lovely bit of knowledge. There's a pub quiz question waiting to happen.
What links The Shining to James Bond? Yeah.
Surely Grady must turn up. He was in every British film in the 1970s. I was watching Where Eagles Dare last night, and Grady turns up as the engineer operating the cable car. So another sort of caretaker role for the actor. He's Philip Stone, I think he's called.
Well, he's in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, isn't he? It's strange, isn't it? You watch all these films all through your life, and then you watch something like The Shining, and then you start watching all those films again, and you can start spotting these people, don't you, that you hadn't spotted before. Wait a minute.
It's the magic of casting, because you're sort of like, there are obviously a limited number of actors who are competent and willing to do certain roles. A lot of actors, that role would be too small for them, or but he's just happy. He just wants 15 days of work and a nice paycheck, and so he'll do it. Maybe his interest is in the theatre or something. But anyway, we get Connery, we get these amazing films. There's this idea that Connery is constantly wanting to leave after. I mean, that sets in quite early. He feels that he's very resentful.
It starts in Goldfinger, doesn't it? Because I interviewed Burt Kwok. I think I used some of the quotes in the book because I interviewed him for a magazine article I did years ago. and he could sense, because he just finished Marnie, hadn't he? Because he jumps from Dr. No, he goes straight into Russia with Love. He doesn't do a film in between. So from Dr. No straight into From Russia with Love. So the freshness and enthusiasm is still there. After From Russia with Love, he does Woman of Straw, which I think is a very underrated film. I think it's quite a good film. And then he goes into Marnie with Hitchcock. So he just works with Hitchcock in Hollywood, and then he has to come back to the coalface, to the day job. And he's just been in Hollywood with Hitchcock, and he's thinking, how many more of these films have I got to do? Because I want to do more films like Hitchcock's Marnie. So it kicks in Goldfinger. But Burt Kwok said you could sense that this disenchantment was starting, but he was still very professional. He was, I'm a professional actor. I'm here to do a job, and I think that stays in Thunderball. This professionalism. But then it goes, and You Only Live Twice, doesn't it? I think he just doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Although a lot of people complain about that performance, don't they? I don't know what you think about it. People say you can see that he doesn't want to be there. I think that's a little bit unfair. I mean, I think even Connery on 20% is still amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I think You Only Live Twice is one of those films that it's kind of... It doesn't have as striking an image in my head as some of the other films. And in a way, it makes me enjoy it all the more because I'm watching it and it's almost like that's one of the films that still is fresh to me. Yeah. Even though I've watched it 3 or 4... Yeah, no, not 3 or 4 times. Loads more times. But maybe I've watched it 10 times and I've watched Goldfinger 20 times, So it's... There are still bits that I'll go, I forgot about the ship in Hong Kong harbour that's at an angle or...
But I think people say his performance is I mean the example is I suppose the Little Nelly helicopter battle when he's sat in Little Nelly and he's just pressing buttons and blowing things up, and he's like, you could put a shop dummy in because he's so expressionless and not. But I think that's deliberate. It's like even Bond. He's thinking Bond the character is bored because all he has to do is press this button and he blows up a helicopter. So whether that's him method acting, saying I'm showing Bond's boredness of just pressing a button and destroying something, and maybe I'm thinking too much into that. Maybe he was just bored shitless of sitting in a little helicopter replica mock-up on Pinewood's D stage for like 7 hours,
I think it's a bit unfair to blame the actor for what is sort of a slightly uninspiring action sequence.
Exactly. It's like give me some good stuff here and then I'll bloody act for you. And also I think his relationship, it wasn't just the fact that the Bond films were taking up so long because they got bigger, didn't they? Obviously from Dr. No. Schedules got bigger. That was the thing. There was lots of things eating at Connery. It was the schedules were getting longer, and they were cutting into. If you're making a Bond film for 8 months, there's very little else you can do for the rest of the year. You can't make another film. Your options are very very drastically shortened. So he was getting frustrated in that way. He was getting frustrated because he was getting paid. His salary was getting increased, but the producers were making so much money on image rights and marketing, which Connery got nothing. He got nothing from that at all. His image was all over the world. It was on pillowcases, it was on lunch boxes, it was on cereal packets, and goodness knows what. And he wasn't getting a bean from that. So I think he resented that greatly. And of course, he getting bored of the character as well. And his relationship with the producers, because I did another book a few years ago on the producers when Harry met Cubby, which was a story of the Bond producers. And by You Only Live Twice, his relationship with both of them had gone completely, especially with Saltzman. There was something between Connery and Saltzman that I tried to ask people, and they couldn't really describe it. It was just maybe just, I don't know, boil it down to just pure hatred. I don't know. He just hated the guy. On You Only Live Twice, he would stop acting if Saltzman came on the set.
I didn't realise it got to that level.
Yeah, someone told me that. He said he was acting, I think, a scene in Osato's office or something. It was at Pinewood, and he was acting, and Saltzman walked on the set, and Connery just stopped acting, and Saltzman had to leave the set. And on Diamonds Are Forever, he said, I don't want to see Saltzman. No, I don't want to see him around. Tom Mankiewicz told me this. They were shooting in Las Vegas, the car chase scene, and they were all in a caravan. It was Connery, Mankiewicz, and Guy Hamilton. Saltzman arrived on the set, and there was a bubbling of people saying, Saltzman's here, what's Connery going to do? Saltzman came into the dressing room and they thought fireworks would happen, and Connery got up and kissed him on the head.
In a way, that leads into the search for a replacement of Connery, which had been ongoing before Connery left, because there was always the idea, and this goes throughout the book, that the producers would sort of begin a search almost as part of negotiations for the next contract, that we're gonna waive some auditions just to get you to know that we do have alternatives. We don't have. This
is especially what happened later on with Roger, wasn't it? Which we'll get to. It was a game of bluff they started to play with him. Yes,
I guess the first transition was the most dangerous, because just that idea that you're going to get another actor to play this iconic character who seems so identified with, and they kept making this analogy, the producers, of, oh well, we've had loads of actors play Tarzan.
Yes,
but that doesn't quite work, because Connery wasn't playing Tarzan in the first cinematic outing. No?
Yeah, and also I think Tarzan was owned by so many different companies, wasn't it? I think it was. I suppose the Johnny Weissmuller was a series of Tarzan films, but there'd been lots of Tarzan films before then. There'd been silent films, so yes, it's almost like when Alex Ferguson retired as Manchester United manager, that the next guy in was almost a sacrificial lamb, wasn't he? And I think Lazenby was sort of in some way a sacrificial lamb, because I think anybody taking over from Connery was on a losing wicket, I think.
He's such an interesting character, Lazenby, because he's so... I mean, that story is so pitted with bad decisions all the way along the line.
Yeah.
I think one of the ones that really leapt out to me in the book is Peter Hunt sort of finding out that he'd lied about his acting experience, and him saying, oh, well, you've just lied about it and convinced two of the sharpest producers in the world. That means you must be a wonderful actor. Don't worry about it, my dear boy. I'll see you through the process. And then Lazenby offended him during the first day of shooting, and he didn't talk to him for the rest of the shoot. And I'm just sort of thinking, wait a minute, Peter Hunt, it's your movie, man. Isn't like dealing with your actor, regardless of what he did, isn't that like one of your prime responsibilities? Because my view of that film is that it's one of the best directed Bond films, with the potential exception of some of the acting. I wouldn't say all of the acting. I think Lazenby is amazing in the last scene, but he delivers what I would consider a patchy performance. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
I think I can understand why they gave Peter Hunt the directing chores, because he'd been with them since the beginning, hadn't he, as editor, and his contribution to the early Bond films as an editor are outstanding. And he wanted to be a director, so I think it was beholden on Cubby and Harry to give him that chance, I guess. But I think they chose the wrong film. They should have brought a seasoned professional director in to handle Lazenby, because Peter Hunt, he's got enough on his plate. He's got this huge budget. They're filming in Switzerland. There were problems with the snow. He's got his own demons, Peter Hunt, because this is his first film as a director. So, and he's got a greenhorn playing Bond. That was a huge mistake. I think they should have asked Lewis Gilbert to direct Secret Service, probably. Do another one after, because we got a young boy. We really need a pro. And then said to Peter, "Did you do the next one?"
We almost need like a co-director just to direct Lazenby, to do his performance.
Yeah, because I mean, it's as I say, Peter Hunt, setting a shot up. He's got he had so much on his plate as working himself, dealing with his own problems of. This is my first film, to deal with a young actor, not just a young actor coming in to make a film, but taking over from Sean Connery,
And not even a young actor, a young man a model who has done no acting at all.
He hadn't been in front of a movie camera before he auditioned.
Yeah.
It
wasn't like he was on TV.
Theatre, don't you? You take maybe an actor from the theatre who's never done a film, but at least he knows how to formulate a performance, how to create a character. Yeah, the more you think about it, the more absurd it was. The poster for On Her Majesty's Secret Service says James Bond, doesn't it? Maybe they thought the character was so huge that they could put a stuffed donkey and it would still work, because the character was so strong. It's not about the actor, almost. It doesn't matter who be cast as Bond because people are going to see it because it's James Bond, and anyone can inhabit that part.
I really love the quote that you have from Sam Mendes saying that line that he says in the beginning. This never happened to the other fella. Him saying that's a huge mistake because you've just told the audience.
I came across that quote and I thought that was fascinating. That's why I put the whole quote in full, because it's quite a lengthy quote, isn't it? See, well, you've got a very, very experienced and clever director there, haven't you? Can you imagine if they asked Mendes to come on to Skyfall and it was his first film?
Well, or even Casino Royale and it was his first film.
Well.
Yeah, exactly. He has got to introduce Daniel Craig to the world.
Although Mendes came from the theatre, of course, didn't he? So he's used to directing, so that wouldn't have actually been a problem. But you've got a guy who was an editor. I mean, a lot of directors start from being an editor. John Glenn, of course, famously started as a... And I think Peter Hunt had done so. Didn't he do second unit on The Olive Tortoise? I think he did, didn't he?
I think there was a sense that he was going on location and he was sort of sitting beside the...
Oh, very much. He very much wanted to be a director. Yeah, very much.
I would reiterate. I think it is a really well directed film, and there are some.
I agree. I think it was, but I think his workload was too much. That's why his relationship with Lazenby fell apart, because he had his own problems, Peter. So look, this is my first film as well. I'm up all night working out how I'm going to do this scene the next day. What did
Lazenby do to offend him?
Well, I don't know. I've always thought we know. Well, Peter Hunt was gay, wasn't he? So did he make a pass, or I don't know. I've always thought that was a bit strange. I mean, I'm not saying that happened or anything like that, but maybe he had a crush on him. I don't know. And Lazenby was a very coarse Australian, wasn't he? It was very coarse Australian. He probably told him to F off or something. Come out for a drink with me tonight, and we'll have... No, you F off. I don't know. Yeah. Something happened, because it was weird. Well, you've just been given a James Bond film, and you're on the first day you've destroyed your relationship with the main actor, and you don't talk to him for the rest of the filming. Something really big happened, didn't it? Personally, to have been so offended.
I mean, and the other funny thing, of course, is like the fact that Lazenby was, nailed on to do the next one. That he wasn't gonna, he voluntarily sort of walked off the film because he'd been told that Bond was passé.
That's right. I think, we're talking, because there's the thing in the book, isn't there? There was a meeting, wasn't there, when they were working out who to cast, and also because with Connery gone, it was like, shall we change the way we make Bond films? Shall we change direction? Shall we, because the 69, Easy Rider, Woodstock, all this counterculture stuff was happening. Do we sort of go down that road with a very young, trendy Bond? But the decision was, no, let's do another because of Connery type Bond, which is why they went for George, because he looked like Connery. He was sort of a Connery-esque person, wasn't he? The haircut, everything.
I love the fact that he goes into the barbers and he says, give me a haircut like Sean Connery. It's like, Sean Connery hasn't got any hair, man. It's a wig.
That's the story, isn't it? It was what Cubby's Barbers, wasn't it, in the Savoy or something? Yeah, whether that's true, but it's been said many times that that's what happened. That Cubby was there when he came in to have his haircut. Yeah, but I interviewed the casting director, a guy called Dyson Lovell, who was a Shakespearean actor who was the casting agent on Secret Service, and he was the one who. Because Lazenby came into... Because there's a story, isn't it, that Lazenby barged his way into the producer's office and said, I'm the new Bond. Well, according to Dyson Lovell, he barged into the office, but he barged into Dyson Lovell's office. And it was Dyson Lovell who phoned up Harry Saltzman and said, there's someone who's just walked in. I don't know who he is. I don't know if he's an actor, but you have to see him. You have to see him.
And you sort of write that he regrets that as well.
No, he doesn't regret it, but he said, "Don't blame me, Gov." He's like, I'm just the messenger. I just said maybe this guy's good. You don't actually have to cast him, but
I mean, that's a really good point that you make as well. Is that they surround him with really good actors. Telly Savalas as the baddie.
Well, again, Dyson says that. So we've got a youngster. We got a youngster, a very inexperienced actor. So we'd better. We can't give it. Because you look at all the Bond girls are sort of unknowns, aren't they? Daniel Bianchi and people like that. Claudine Auger, they're sort of up and coming. But that's why, they went for Diana Rigg, very experienced, Royal Shakespeare Company, Avengers, and then Savalas, very strong American actor. Gabriel Fazzetti, big European actor. So yeah, they surrounded him with real A-list stuff, A-list talent, and that in a way that could have destroyed him, couldn't it? Really, because but he holds his own, doesn't he? He holds his own with Diana. They're actually really good together, aren't they? Their scenes together are wonderful, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favourite scenes are them together, and I think that last scene is, I mean, it's a little bit of availability bias. That thing of the last thing you see in a performance is the thing you judge the whole performance by. Yes. So that last scene is so good, it always makes me go, Lazenby's a great actor. He's wonderful in that scene. But it's not true. He's not a great actor all the way through. That scene, he's wonderful, and lots of the scenes with Diana Rigg, he's wonderful. But I remember there being a story about the bit where he puts on the voice of Hilary Bray, and they had to use the actor who plays Hilary Bray to dub him because he couldn't get the voice right.
I mean, half of Lazenby's performance is dubbed by George Baker. All that stuff at Piz Gloria he's dubbed. Do you think was that a decision made? I don't think it was a decision saying, look, let's make a better performance by have a good actor dubbing him.
It's funny because that's very common European practice. In European films,
you didn't need to, because why is George Baker, the actor who's playing the guy that he's impersonating, why did that have to be dubbed by George Baker? Because Telly Savalas as Blofeld doesn't know what the guy sounds like. So Lazenby could have put on a silly English accent, and that would have been sufficient, wouldn't it? You didn't need to dub George Baker, unless they thought, well, we can make Lazenby look good here by having a good actor saying his lines.
I mean, I love this topic of dubbing because one of my favourite factoids here is Singing in the Rain, where Debbie Reynolds is dubbing I can't stand him. And when she dubs her, it's actually the actor she's dubbing is dubbing Debbie Reynolds as her.
I didn't know that.
As the educated version of her. So it's like it's a double dubbing. It's so postmodern that you have this.
That's brilliant. That's one of my favourite films as well, Singing in the Rain.
Oh, it is. It is everything. Jean Hagen. Jean Hagen is the name of the actress.
But the Bond producers weren't immune to dubbing, of course, because they dubbed. Sir Andres was dubbed. Daniel Bianchi was dubbed. The two Japanese girls from The Early Toys was dubbed. Claudine
Goldfinger?
Frode was dubbed. Adolfo Celli was dubbed. In fact, in Secret Service, isn't Gabriel Fazzetti dubbed?
I wouldn't be surprised, because he's got very strong...
So they were used to dubbing actors. So the decision to dub Lazenby with George Baker would not have been an unusual thing for them to have decided to do, because they were used to dubbing actors.
So you get the return of Sean Connery of Diamonds Are Forever, but this is very much a sort of stopgap. He knows he's only there for one. He's only the producers only really want him there for one.
But the amazing thing with that is they actually did sign an actor to play him, to play Bond. They signed on the dotted line was John Gavin.
Wow, yeah.
He actually signed a contract. And I spoke to Maria Gavin, who's John Gavin's daughter, who was a little girl at the time. So she couldn't remember. She didn't have a lot of detail to give me, but she gave me a few interesting things. And he was a friend of Cubby. Cubby knew him. People can't quite picture what he looks like. He's in Psycho.
Yeah, he's the boyfriend.
He's the boyfriend of
Marion Crane.
Yeah, Marion Crane, Janet Leigh's sister. Yeah, he's very good in Psycho. Actually, he's not a great actor, John Gavin. He's not very good in Spartacus. He's in Spartacus, isn't he?
Right. He's Caesar in Spartacus.
He's Caesar. Yeah. He's a bit wooden in Spartacus, but he's very good in Psycho. And he was friends with Cubby, and I think Cubby knew he was reliable. There've been murmurings about casting an American, haven't there? Burt Reynolds and people like that. I think Guy Hamilton was up for Burt Reynolds, and Cubby said, Bond has to be British, and then goes and signs up an American. So yeah, he signed on the dotted line.
I sometimes wonder what you were mentioning earlier about the producers being American and Canadian. A British producer would have been more inclined towards David Niven or something like that. I also think maybe a British producer might have been more inclined to go for an American because of we've got like that inferiority complex where we think, well, if we want it to be international, it's going to have to be an American because that will open up the market, Yeah,
and also they're tougher than we are. You look at all those 1950s films. They always brought people like Brian Denlevy down and Dana Andrews to play the hunky sort of lead action person because we didn't have any
Yeah,
Didn't
yeah.
have any action stars. We had Stanley Baker, and that was it. You can have Dirk Bogarde. He tried his best in Campbell's Kingdom, I think, to be sort of a tough action hero, but it didn't quite work. So yes, it was luckily we did have that rise of working class actors, didn't we, in the early '60s, where you could have people like Finney, Bates. They were tough. Harris. These were tough
It's
guys.
so funny you're reeling off all those names earlier, Burton and all that. And every time you do that, I think, but we've got Benedict Cumberbatch. So where are our working class actors?
Well, this is why all my film books are '60s, '70s really, because I just don't think we make the same kind of films anymore. We don't have the same pool of talent. We've got very talented people, but I don't think we've got the pool, the wide pool of people. I mean, if you just grab a copy of Film Review from any year from the '70s or '60s and see what films were on in the cinema, it blows your brain off, and then you're desperately looking for a film to see at the cinema if there's anything good on, and there isn't really. Occasionally a good film turns up, but that's it.
So we have Diamonds Are Forever comes in, and then we have Roger Moore comes in, and he has been sort of loitering around the Bond casting process.
He wasn't. Yeah, he was mentioned in dispatches on Doctor No, but he couldn't have done it Doctor No because he'd already signed to play the Saints. So he couldn't have done it anyway. But he was definitely mentioned in dispatches. Well,
It's quite similar age to Connery, right? It's not.
yeah, and it's only about 2 years difference.
So it's not like they're getting a really young actor. And I mean, Diamonds Are Forever always strikes me one of the main things that's a real take home, apart from Connery's sideburns, is that Connery really ages between You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. I mean, he goes from being like a secret agent, someone who seems to be a consistent. There's a consistency between him and Dr. No. And then when you see him in Diamonds Are Forever, it's like, who phoned Connery's dad?
He almost becomes Matt Helm in Diamonds Are Forever, doesn't he? He looks like sort of Dean Martin-esque, doesn't he? Sort of there's a brilliant quote actually in one of the Richard Burton diaries, the big 700-page book that came out, and he and Elizabeth went to see Diamonds Are Forever. It's a diary entry. So we went to see Diamonds Are Forever. They thoroughly enjoyed it, but he thought Connery looked like a Welsh miner gone to seed. That's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, he looks better in Never Say, doesn't he? He looks much leaner and fitter and healthier. There are certain things. I mean, he looks like I've always thought he looks like Cary Grant in Diamonds. He sort of looks like this very late middle-aged guy you could see was really handsome when he was younger, but he's starting to sort of get old a little bit. Yeah.
Well, it's like that scene where he's sort of drowning the two women in the swimming pool, where you're sort of. It's so obvious that there should be a restraining order against him. He shouldn't be going anywhere near schools because the age disparity is such.
There are flashes. There are flashes where he looks. You can see the Connery from Doctor No. There are flashes, but not many. If you look at the next film he did was The Offence, and if you visualize in your head what Connery looks like in The Offence, and that was made 6 months afterwards.
That's potentially, I would argue, one of his top in the top three of his non-Bond performances.
The Hill for me is his greatest performance.
Yeah, he's superb in that film.
Because I've always thought, if you look at someone like Anthony Hopkins or even Michael Caine, they're very naturalistic. I never thought Connery was a naturalistic actor. He's a star. So it's like Burt Lancaster. They're sort of, molded by the gods, and they're sort of this very difficult to slip into a character because they're always Burt Lancaster or they're always Connery because they're huge people.
Yeah.
People like Anthony Hopkins can become anything they want because they're almost nondescript. Connery's huge. He's sort of a walking mountain. But I think in The Hill is his most naturalistic performance. He's almost a method actor there. He's almost been a method actor. He's almost been Pacino-esque.
I absolutely agree with you. I think maybe The Offence is the other one where you kind of, during that film, you forget it's Connery.
He's like the best method actor you've ever seen. There's the scene between him and Harry Andrews where they're having a massive argument, and it's some of the best acting I've ever seen by an actor. Full stop. I mean, it's De Niro type acting.
Yeah,
it's that good. If you watch that scene between him and Harry Andrews. He's completely in that part. He's completely taken over by it, which I don't think he was by any other role. So he's always sort of Connery, isn't he?
That's what I love about that is you say in the book, Diamonds Are Forever, one of the things was they said, okay, you can, sight unseen, you can make two films with us, we'll finance them. And the first one he chose was The Offence. The second one never
Well, it was going
materialize.
to be Macbeth. I think there were rumblings about Macbeth for the second, but then Polanski sort of took the rug from under his feet, and Polanski was doing a Macbeth. And I think there must have been a time limit on the contract because,
Right.
or maybe Connery just said, "Oh fuck it," because The Offence was a disaster. Well, it wasn't a disaster because it didn't cost very much, but it wasn't very well received, was it? It was.
But I mean, there's no way anybody made that film and thought, what do you mean it didn't make loads of money? I mean, it's such a brutal and a unrelentingly grim film, and I just so admire him as a star who he could have done any vanity project, and instead he does something which is playing a character which is it's amazing. It's a really massive.
Weirdly, that went into the Odeon Leicester Square. It should have gone into an art theatre. That Connery blamed that. Why are you putting it into a 1,000-seater cinema?
It should have gone to Cannes.
Well, it should have gone into some of the Odeon Haymarket or somewhere. So you're filling up like a 200-seat. So you've got word of mouth that you can't get tickets for this film. Yeah. But if you're in 1,000 and you've got like 50 people in it, you're looking around and think this film's a failure, isn't it? It's all about that's why a lot of films, they say, no, we want it on the art house circuit because you create a buzz. If you put it into a massive cinema, no one will come,
Yeah.
It's a disaster and stay away. So that was the problem with The Offence. They just put it into the Odeon Leicester Square like it was the next Bond film, But it's strange, The Offence, great performance, but again, quite a theatrical performance. I mean, it was based on a play, wasn't it? So there's an element of that still there. But yeah, it's a terrific performance. The whole scene with him and Vivian Merchant is the best thing in it.
Yeah.
He's talking to the wife, and that's a tremendous, sort of a 10-minute scene, and it's just fabulous stuff.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that as a kid and being really, we were lucky, weren't we, growing up? Because in the 70s, all these films were being shown on TV, and we were so lucky to catch all these movies, The French Connection, all these films being shown on TV. That's where you saw them first, because they were X's, so you didn't see them in the cinema.
Yeah.
You saw them at 9:30 on a Monday night.
What was your first X?
I think it was Friday the 13th.
Mine was Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it was even an X in those. I think that it was already 18 at that point.
Yes, it would have been an 18. Yeah. So we're talking 1981, so I was 15. Yeah. Or maybe Sex Pistols' Great Rock and Roll Swindle, actually. That might have been my first X. Around about the same time. Yeah. I was lucky because I was quite tall, so I got into an X when I was 15.
So we get to Roger Moore and this sort of sense that he does look good, and he does look young in Live and Let Die. He looks svelte and all the rest of it.
The thing he did before Live and Let Die was The Persuaders. Now, if you see him in The Saint, yes, you can see him as Bond. You think this guy can play Bond, definitely.
Yeah.
But you watched him in The Persuaders, probably because it's a very jokey thing. You can't see him as Bond, can you? I don't see Roger Moore. He's brilliant in The Persuaders. I love The Persuaders. But it's not saying, oh, he's the next Bond. Because he's got long hair, isn't he? He's very sort of, not playboy at all. It's a very fey performance, isn't it? It's a very camp performance.
And he's standing next to Tony Curtis, so that's saying something. He must be really camping it up if he's.
They're both camping. They're both camping the road tents in The Persuaders. It's glorious. But I think he was on their radar. I mean, The Persuaders would not have got it. But I mean, he was already Bond before they started shooting The Persuaders. Because I did a book on ITC, the shows of ITC, and I interviewed people who worked on The Persuaders. He would not sign a contract. Roger would not sign a contract. Tony signed a contract, but it was a gentleman's agreement with Roger. It was a handshake, because he would not sign a contract in case he went into a second season, because he knew he was going to be Bond.
You said you didn't like Man with a Golden Gun. Tell me about that. That sort of your changing attitude to that film.
I was 10 years old, so I had no sense at all. But for me, it was. I mean, it's generally seen as one of the weakest Bond films anyway, isn't it? Generally, it's down the bottom. So I'm sort of at 10. The 10-year-old me was right, because history does dump on it from a high height. I just thought it was a bit frivolous. It must have been a bit frivolous and not very dangerous. All that kung fu stuff was just even now it's not good, is it? It's a bit weak. And also I think it wasn't big, because if you look at the Connerys, the climaxes of the Connerys, you had Bond in Fort Knox, you've got the underwater battle, you've got the volcano. With Man of the Golden Gun, it's a power plant with one guy who falls into a vat of and Britt Eklund in a bikini. That's it, and a few explosions on the model lot at Pinewood. It was underwhelming.
It looks like a TV episode.
And I think Broccoli knew that, because the next film is Spy, where we go back to the giant base, But I watching it now, I like Golden Gun now. It has a nostalgia thing for me now. Yeah.
And we've got another Shining connection with Spy Who Loved Me, because Stanley Kubrick lit part of it, apparently.
He did indeed, yes. I don't want to blow my trumpet, but I remember interviewing Ken Adam, and he told, I don't know if I was the first person he told, but he actually revealed that to me, and he said he did, and he didn't reveal that until Stanley died,
right,
publicly, because Stanley told him not to reveal it,
right,
because he came at night. He came at, nobody knew that Kubrick had been on that set, and Ken because Ken Adam had done Barry Lyndon, of course, a couple of years before, and he asked him to come on the set one evening. He turned up at Pinewood that night, and Ken had to open the the stage with the key, opened it up, and he was hours there, telling him how to light it. He said, "Don't tell anyone." So it was only after Kubrick died that I think it came out.
Roger has his tenure, which I think everybody agrees goes on 2 movies too long.
It does a bit, yes, bless him. But I think there was I think, again, interviewing John Glenn, and they said we couldn't think of anyone else. We had to keep bringing Roger back, because there were candidates, but nobody that could take Roger's mantle. Because by then Roger was Bond as much as Connery had been, really, in the minds of the public.
Because he changed Bond. That was the thing that he did. Whereas Connery had his own Bond, Moore's Bond is a very different creature. It's very different. He has these flashes of violence, but the things people mostly remember are the comedy. And that's what, for me personally, I find very difficult watching the Moore Bonds, is because I just find the comedy not funny. It's just like a series of dad jokes.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually. He's like your dad playing James Bond, isn't it? I mean, if your dad is cast with Bond, he's my dad. Oh God, he's not saying, he's not doing the thing that he raises his eyebrow. Oh God, he told me he was going to say that joke, and it doesn't work, Dad. Don't say it. Yeah,
the bit where he turns up in, was it Spy Who Loved Me? He turns up in a Lawrence of Arabia gear with the music. It's just like, we don't need that. That's like something from a Freddie Starr TV program or something.
And Barbara Barks we're getting attacked by Jaws in the van, and he's going, "Women drivers." He's like, God, Dad, don't. You can't say that.
Leave it.
It's sexist to say. I told you it's sexist to say that. Roger's great. We love Roger. He's brilliant.
What's your favourite Roger?
Spy.
Yeah, I think
Spy is the greatest hits album, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's everything: car chases, helicopters blowing up, ski chase, gadgets, big bass, silly villain, fantastic side villain. Great locations. It's got everything. It's
got really good locations. I think that when you see
cinematography, that's what, again, Bond. Every Bond film is superbly shot, pretty much. The cinematography on the Bond film, people, Bond, it's rubbish, but the craftsmanship on the Bond film, musically as well, top-notch music, fantastic editing, brilliant production. They're so well crafted. They're brilliantly made films, and I don't think we appreciate it, fans appreciate it, but I don't think the general audience, they see the Bond films as like carry-on films, they just churn them out and we go and see them every summer, but they are really well-made films, But interesting, going back to, John Glenn saying that they couldn't find anyone to sort of take over from Roger, but there have been a few. I mean, I interviewed Oliver Tobias, and people know Oliver Tobias. He was in The Stud with Joan Collins, and Arthur the Britons. It was a TV series that people might remember from their childhood, and he was I think a favourite of Cubby's. I think, because I spoke to Oliver, and he said that he got on really well. He really liked Cubby, and they got on really well, and they actually went shopping together. They went round the Oxford Street, all the posh shops. And Cubby was saying, "Oh, that suit would look nice on you, Oliver." But I think it was a game of bluff, because after, from For Your Eyes Only onwards, that Roger was on a pay-per-play film. I don't think he was on a contract anymore for 3 films. I think he was doing each film as a separate contract. So
Right.
I will come back for Your Eyes Only just for one film, and then we'll see what happens on the next one. And he was, I think, saying, well, I'm not sure if I'll do the next one. You know, it was sort of a game of bluff with Cubby. And Cubby would bring in these young guys like Oliver Tobias or Lewis Collins and say, look, Roger, I can bring Lewis on. Lewis is really popular. So it was a little game of bluff that they played with each other. And Octopussy as well, because James Brolin was very close to playing Bond.
Another American.
Another American. There's the screen test, isn't there, on the DVD of James Brolin's screen test. And James Brolin, there's a quote in the book because he was interviewed on British morning television a few years ago, and they brought up the Bond test, and he thought he got it. He thought he got it because he was learning how to. He had a personal trainer and everything, and he'd got a house he was going to live in. He was seen all these apartments that he was going to live in, and he went back to Los Angeles. He said, I went back to the States to close my house up and bring all my stuff over to the UK. And the Cubby phoned me up and say, sorry, Roger's going to do Octopussy. So, thanks. So if Roger hadn't done Octopussy, it was going to be Brolin.
That's how close. Again, the Americans get closer than anybody else. John Gavin, and
I think Lewis Collins would have been good. I think, it would have been good to see Lewis Collins. He had an interview with Broccoli, and he thinks he blew it because he was a bit too in his face, as it were. You know, I'm going to be brilliant as Bond, blah blah blah. But it was complete front, like Connery. He must have read what Connery did, because Connery, when he went to the audition for Dr. No, he sort of was banging on the table and, just saying all these demands. I'm not going to screen test you, take me as I am. And that really impressed them. And Lewis must have heard about that and said, right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and say, this is what I'm going to do. And Cubby went, whoa.
Yeah. And there's only one Connery.
You can't.
That's the banging on the desk was incidental. The being Sean Connery was the central thing.
Yeah, and it's the classic thing, isn't it? They both went to the window and watched him walk down the street.
Yeah.
And they just thought, that's it. We've got our Bond.
That panther.
If you watch John Wayne, I've just watched The Alamo a few days ago on Blu-ray, and when John Wayne walks away from the camera, he's got that walk. No one walks like John Wayne. And I think the same with Connery. When Connery walks across a casino floor, nobody walks like Connery.
What I think is interesting in your book as well is you mention how he actually went and studied things like dance and stuff, because you think Connery he's just this panther, he's this beast with this the Edinburgh milkman, all that sort of stuff. There's this myth of him being this untrained diamond in the rough, and he's not. He got that walk by studying and by doing working on it.
Well, it was thanks to his wife Diane Cilento, who was a very serious Australian actress. She'd done Shakespeare and stuff, and she went to this mine. I think this guy called Jat Malmgren, a Swedish, who taught mine. Pierce Brosnan later studied with him.
Right.
Interesting. And he studied mine, and it was Diane Cilento went to this guy's class, so Connery went along as well, and that's how he used all this. There's a great quote in there from a guy I interviewed called Philip Savile, who was a film and television director who directed Connery and Cilento in a play before he was Bond, who talks about Connery's movement, and he said there's no other actor on screen that he's seen that has the same grace of movement as Connery, and the only other one is Steve McQueen.
Right.
There's this grace of movement, that they have. But he describes it better than I ever could.
Clint Eastwood in...
It helps in the fight scenes as well. When Connery fights, it's almost a ballet.
Yeah.
It's because if you watch a film and it's like old cowboy films, and the fights are they're awful, aren't they? They're just there's no grace about. If you watch a Connery fight scene, there's real grace. It's almost like a dance of movement,
Well, that's one of the best bits of You Only Live Twice, is that helicopter shot of him just running along a dock in Japan, punching the hell out of it. And it's a helicopter shot, so it's really distant. But he's still, you just know that he's, it's a wonderful set piece.
I think You Only Twice has got one, if not the best fight scene in a Bond film, which is Connery in Osato's office with the sumo wrestler guy.
And he uses the furniture and the...
It's an incredible... The scene where they get... it's just an incredible fight scene. I think it's one of the best film fight scenes, actually. I think it's just an amazing fight scene. So imaginative, yeah.
So when does Tim Dalton come into the picture?
Well, that's because when Roger finally leaves, and I think there was a meeting when Roger went to see Cubby in his house in Los Angeles, and it was sort of a joint agreement that because Roger wasn't asked to leave. It was sort of, it's time to go, isn't it, Cubby? I think it is, Roger. It was one of those conversations, yeah. I think Roger knew the game was up. I think he probably regretted doing View to Kill. I don't blame him. He looked a little bit grizzled in that. So I think he knew the game was up and it was time for a younger man. And that was very much the first port of call was a younger man. They were thinking of doing almost a young Bond film where he just comes out of, he's in naval college and he's just leaves naval college and he's hired by the Secret Service and goes on his first mission. That was the initial plan for Living Daylights. So I think Michael G. Wilson was quite pro that, but Cubby thought no, the audience don't want to see a young Bond because if you look at Dr. No, he's straight in, isn't he? He's in a casino and he's off on a mission. And I think Cubby said, no, we want to see Bond as Bond. Bond is now Bond. We don't want to see how he becomes Bond. Yeah. He's Bond. So that plan was jettisoned. And they did interview a few actors who were very young in their early 20s. One was Michael Praed, who was then Robin of Sherwood on television, just finished Robin of Sherwood. And he's spoken about going to see Cubby in Los Angeles. And Mark Greenstreet, who I interviewed for the book, who'd done a TV drama called Brett Farrar which was very well received. And he did a screen test with John Glenn. It took a whole day to do this screen test. And he said it was absolutely fantastic. It was so professionally done. The set was built. He went into wardrobe. He went into the hairstylist. They did his hair. I did his makeup. They put the suit on. John Glenn was directing him. It was a scene from Much Real Love when he comes back into the hotel room and Michael Praed, and then the guy called Mark Greenstreet, who had just done a BBC serial called Brett Farrar, and it was very successful. So he was sort of the face of the moment. And he went to see that he had an interview, and then they said, come back and do a screen test. And then he told me that he went to his local video shop and hired all the Bond films and got his mate round, and they did a Bond marathon, and he got all the moves and watched Connery, because he was a big Connery fan, and he sort of got some of Connery's moves. And he went to Pinewood, and the set had been built. John Glenn was directing it, and he went into wardrobe and hair, and they did two scenes, the hotel scene from Much Real Love, and then he told me that at one point he went to the toilet and he was standing at the urinals, and this other guy came and stood next to him, and he was dressed in this sort of combat gear, and he was dressed in his Bond dinner jacket, and they sort of looked at each other and said, "What are you here for?" And Mark said, "I'm here for Bond." And he said, "What are you here for?" And he said, "Aliens." And it was Michael Biehn. He'd come back for a few extra shots for Aliens, yeah. And he said, "Oh, well, good luck." And he said, "Oh, good luck to you." And so that was quite a weird thing. You never know who you're going to bump into at Pinewood, yeah. So, yes, I mean, and I think if they were going to go down the young Bond route, it was going to be one of those two. It was going to be Michael Praed or Mark Greenstreet, who would have played the young Bond. But they decided, like they did before, let's just do another Connery-type Bond film. So they went for... but that's when Sam Neill, there's the famous Sam Neill screen test, and a few others as well. Charles Dance was offered it. Mel Gibson was there. Lambert Wilson as well was screen tested. There's pictures of his screen test.
Do you think, and I think Connery is the exception to this, but I almost think that Bond doesn't need a good actor. And in fact, a good actor is kind of wasted in the role. And I mean, I know Daniel Craig has real pretensions to be a good actor. I don't think I've recently watched Queer, and I think he does a lot of acting, but I don't think that's necessarily quantities as makes up for quality. But I think he's brilliant as...
I think you've got to be a good actor. I think I think for whatever role in whatever film, you have to be competent. You can't be a bad actor. But yes, I don't think you need to be Laurence Olivier, do you? You don't need Al Pacino to play Bond. Because Pierce Brosnan said in his press conference, I want to take the layers off the onion, and see what's underneath. We don't really need to see what's underneath Bond. We just need a ski chase. That'll do it.
And Pierce Brosnan, God love him, again, not a great actor, but
No.
but looks really good.
Yeah, I think you need charisma, and that's you can go to acting school and learn to act, but you can't go to charisma school and get charisma. Brosnan's got charisma. Roger had charisma. Sean had everything. Lazenby had charisma, didn't he? He had charm. He looked good. I mean, physically, photogenically, he looked good. But yes, I think that's the problem now with having cast Daniel Craig, who is seen as a serious actor. That they're going to have the next Bond has to be, the latest Royal Shakespeare Company discovery. No, not really. No.
I mean, and Tim Dalton is, I keep calling him Tim Dalton like he's me bud, but he's someone who is coming out of serious acting, and he approaches it very seriously, and there's this sort of refrain that goes along whenever they reboot Bond of we want to go back to the novels, to the novels, which they've never really done. There's even Casino Royale has a very scant relationship to the book. I mean, what went wrong with his tenure?
Well, he was seen as the Shakespeare. We were talking about a serious actors, weren't we? But I mean, he was sort of labelled a Shakespearean actor, weren't they? He was coming from Shakespeare, and he was sort of lowering himself to play Bond, But I mean, going back to Connery, I mean, before playing Bond, he'd just done Macbeth on Canadian television. He'd done Eugene O'Neill. Anna Karenina, on television. He was sort of a classical actor. He'd done a lot of Volpone. He'd done, a lot of Rattigan. Done Alexander the Great Rattigan play on television. So I think Dalton was seen as this sort of serious actor coming in. Serious actor. He'd just done Brenda Starr, hadn't he, with Brooke Shields? Done a Charlie's Angels episode. But
He'd done Flash Gordon.
Yeah, exactly. But because he, done Wuthering Heights and stuff like that, he was seen as this sort of very, very serious theatre actor.
He's become sort of like the hipster's choice of of James Bond now as well.
As a bit, yes.
There's a lot of people.
I like Dalton. I like his two films. I think they're great. I think Living Daylights is probably could be the best Bond debut movie. I mean, Doctor No's brilliant. It's iconic. But by the time. And we didn't know what to expect from Dr. No. The audiences didn't know, so you can't. It almost doesn't count. You have to say, who's the new James Bond? Let's go and see what he does with it.
The best transition movie.
It wasn't applicable to Dr. No, was it? Because it was the first one. So I think post Dr. No, I think Casino Royale is a pretty good debut as well from Daniel. GoldenEye as well is not bad. I think the thing with Timothy is that he didn't crack the American market. That was it. It's money. It was the American studios that he just didn't. Living Daylights did okay in America, not brilliantly, but License to Kill didn't do box office in America. I think United Artists and all the people controlling the purse strings said to Broccoli, Dalton's not the guy. We need someone else. We want Mel Gibson or something like that. That's what the Mel Gibson rumours started. He just wasn't box office.
And when you get Brosnan, you get another situation like you did with Roger Moore, where you've got someone who was bobbing about the orbit for some time.
Yeah. Well, he was going to be in Living Daylights, wasn't he? Of course.
Yeah.
There's the shots of him, standing outside Pinewood next to Cubby's Rolls Royce, and he's in his script. He had the script for Living Daylights.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't read it. I think he said he was in his bedside cabinet and he didn't read it until he knew he'd signed on the dotted line. Because it was all the thing with Remington Steele, wasn't it? Remington, sorry, I've got a bad cough at the moment, half the population. Remington Steele had been cancelled, hadn't they? But I think they had 90 days to change their mind. The producers had 90 days to change their minds to whether or not they would do another series. But basically, Remington Steele was dead, and he got Bond. He was born to be Bond, wasn't he, Brosnan? I mean, he was always going to be Bond. I think I went to in 1981, I went to a James Bond convention in London with the James Bond fan club, and Cassandra Harris was a guest. And I didn't see him, but people have told me he was there as well, but I never saw him. And he'd met Cubby, obviously, on the set of For Your Eyes Only, hadn't they? And they went to dinner.
Right.
So Cubby must have thought, he's an interesting young man. But, and then, yes, I think it was the 89th day of the 90-day period when the producers came back and said, actually, we'll have another series of Remington Steele, thank you. I think because the publicity of Brosnan getting Bond or being auditioned for Bond raised his profile and thought, we'll bring him back and do Remington Steele. So that was it. So they went back to Dalton, because I think they'd been to Dalton before and he was busy on Brenda Starr, and then they went to Brosnan. So I think they actually went to Dalton first, and Dalton, the schedule didn't work out. So then they went to Brosnan, and then Brosnan had to go back to Remington Steele. So they went back to Timothy, who was now free. He'd finished his scheduling, whatever it was, whether it was Brenda Starr or theatre, I don't know, and he was free. Yeah. Wow. And he sort of, you always think with Timothy that he was doing it under duress to some extent. I don't think he gave into it completely like Pierce did or Daniel, because it took a lot of persuading for Daniel to do it, didn't it? I think he thought long and hard about doing it, but once he did it, he completely went into it full pelt, didn't he? But I think there's always something with Timothy that. Because I've read interviews that he gave to Bond fan club magazines and stuff, and they asked him, what's your favourite book? And he thought, why are you asking me all these questions? Well, it's like, get a life, He didn't understand Bond fandom at all. Because there's a great interview with the American James Bond fan club fanzine, and he's saying, what do you do? What do you write in your magazine? And he said, like, they come out every month. Well, how do you fill a magazine every month of Bond stuff? He couldn't get it. He couldn't get the fan element. So I don't think he was. That's a very surface argument, but you always got the view with Timothy that he didn't quite get it. I like his two films. I think they're terrific. Yeah, but he didn't fight for it, did he? When it all went pear-shaped, I think. But Cubby stayed very loyal to Timothy. He didn't want to replace him. Right. He didn't want to, the studio wanted him gone, but Cubby stuck by him for as long as he could until finally he had no choice but to. And then Timothy resigned, didn't he?
Would his next film have been Goldeneye, or did they have a script for the next?
Was it Property of a Lady? They were thinking about getting a Fleming title, and it was going to be completely. I think it was going to be set in Hong Kong, and there was robots in it, and God knows what. Right. So it was a completely new script. I think it's online somewhere. You can read about it. That there was definitely a script, but I think it'd been too long. There was a 5-year gap, wasn't there? So I think it probably was the right decision. It would have been a bit weird for Dalton to have come back actually 5 years after License to Kill. It would have been a bit odd. So I think it was the right time, wasn't it, to bring in a new actor? Yeah, and I think I think the shadow of Brosnan hung over the Dalton films. I think because it's like, particularly in America, because people went to see the Dalton films and said, well, that should have been Pierce. We heard Pierce in that film. I think that's why maybe it didn't work in America, because Pierce was so popular because of Remington Steele that I think Americans were almost expecting him to be Bond, and when he wasn't, they thought, we don't like this guy. Who's that? That's not Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan's James Bond. This guy isn't.
And you don't have really good songs as well in the The Living Daylights by a Heart, and Gladys Knight who does
Gladys Knight in yeah.
You don't have. I mean, even like the worst Roger Moore film, View to a Kill, has like one of the best songs.
Yeah, they are quite they. What always fascinated me about the Dalton era was that they went very serious, didn't they? And the critics didn't like it. And if you read the critics, they always were complaining that Bond was too fantastical and didn't take itself seriously and too jokey. And as soon as the Bond films became, right, okay, we'll do a really serious spy film, then the critics were saying, where's the ski chases? Where's all the silly gags? Where's all the silly gadgets? Where are all the silly girl names of Fatima Bumrush and stuff? You can't win with critics, can you? You give them what they're complaining about, and they start complaining about what they're missing. So he couldn't win, could he?
Also, So we get Brosnan, and we get his tenure, which is kind of a very, except for maybe Die Another Day, I think all of Brosnan's films kind of stand up as even
Absolutely, absolutely they do. He saved Bond, didn't he? Really,
Yeah.
he really did. I mean, people. I remember a very good friend of mine saying Bond's finished, and he was a fan, and a real cinephile. And he was saying when GoldenEye was sort of on the horizon, he said, I think it's not going to work. I think Bond's dead. I don't think people, it's been 6 years or whatever, and people, things with True Lies and all those kind of films were coming out. And so that's what people wanted. Lethal Weapon, that's what people want to see. They don't want to see Bond is out of date.
They want to see Die Hard and Bruce Willis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he was convinced about it. And I thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe the climate now is they want sort of the John McClane, Bruce Willis type, Mel Gibson action kind of thing. And Bond, an action hero in a dinner suit, it's not going to work in Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's just not going to work anymore. So, big gamble. Whether it was going to work, GoldenEye, whether people would accept Bond again,
I've seen every Bond film at the cinema. I remember seeing GoldenEye in Liverpool at the Allerton Cannon, and I watched it, and I just remember thinking, as soon as the lights came on, as soon as the music came at the end, just thinking, I can't wait to see that. When's the next one?
Yeah.
And it just.
I think that happened with the trailer. I remember going to see it, and the trailer came on for GoldenEye when he walks across and shoots his name, his 007, and you sensed the audience thought, oh, thank God. The only other time I've sort of sensed that was the trailer for Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, and he hadn't done a Western, had he, for about 10 years, and it was a full cinema. The trailer came up for Unforgiven, and there's a shot, and Eastwood turns round, and there he is in a cowboy hat, and you felt the audience go, oh my God, Eastwood's back in a Western. And it was like that for Bond. You just sense it from the audience, so we can't wait for this. This is what we want. So I think it's like now they're talking about, if there is going to be a new Bond film, they're going to go back to sort of the Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan, more fantasy stuff. And I think that's what we would love. I mean, can you imagine where we are at the moment, to go and see a Bond film with a silly Bond film, in inverted commas, an escapist Bond film, which is, it's not about, human suffering and stuff. It's just about, fun and excitement.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, there's always this thing that Bond is always competing with stuff. So it's always competing with, Bourne, with Daniel Craig, and it's competing with Mission Impossible now, because Mission Impossible has set the stakes so high when it comes to stunt sequences. And all of these films, to some degree, have taken inspiration and talent, in some cases, from the Bond stable.
Absolutely. But they're homages, aren't they? They're homages. I mean, Jason Bourne, JB. Yeah. Although Mission Impossible does go back to the 60s, doesn't it, the TV show? These all grew out of Bond, didn't they? Mission Impossible started in the mid-60s.
But Mission Impossible is really, the original TV show is really about the team. And there's no one character who is... I would argue the movie franchise is a James Bond film by another name, because it's all based on Ethan Hunt. And he has his team, but he has a team the way James Bond has Q and Moneypenny.
Moneypenny, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's get on to what next, because we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, and I'm really interested in the next, because I was saying I feel that there's something imminent, but you were saying you were a little bit more...
There may very well be. We might, before this is broadcast, it might be old news because it's been announced or something. I mean, Aaron Taylor-Johnson was the name that came out, almost saying in the next few days he's going to be announced as James Bond. This was a few months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then it's gone radio silent, hasn't it, after that? It really has. I think he'd be a good choice myself. I think he's a very interesting actor. I saw Bullet Train. I think he's very good in that.
Yeah, he's good in that.
It's a nice, jokey performance. So he's got the humour. Because I always think with Bond, is we were saying about you don't have to be a great actor, but I think the two things you've got to get right with Bond is you've got to look good in a suit in a casino. You've got to have the charm. You've got to have the playboy element. It's yin and yang. You need to look good in the suit. You need to be the playboy. You need to be smooth and stylish, but then you've got to be a bastard. You've got to be able to kill somebody really nasty in an elevator. So you've got to be Beauty and the Beast almost. You've got to be this glamorous sort of spy, and then you've got to be the brutal assassin. Yeah. Dalton had that, I think. I think Dalton looked really good in a dinner jacket. He didn't have the humour, did he? That was always the thing with Dalton. People complained about. He wasn't good with the quips, the one-liners, which Brosnan was.
I would argue that Craig was, because I think a lot of
Yes,
people
he
say
was actually. He was very sardonic, wasn't he?
when he says, "Do I look like I give a damn?"
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
say, shaken or stirred,
Yeah.
that was funny. That was genuinely funny.
It's stuff like when in No Time to Die, he comes into Q's house, doesn't he? Say, "I've missed you, Q," and stuff like that. It's like very jokey and very
Yeah.
very sardonic,
Yeah.
deadpan. But I keep going back to Connery. But I mean, Connery had it both, didn't he? He could do the quips. He looked good. He had the. Because again, Tom Mankiewicz said, because he wrote Diamonds and Live and Let Die, so he wrote for Connery and Moore, and he said to me, and I think he wrote it in his book as well, that when you're writing for Connery, you can write something like he goes into a restaurant and has a meal with a beautiful woman, but he knows she's a double agent, and he can be incredibly charming, and then he can stick a knife in her belly under the table, and you think that's what Connery does. That's Connery's Bond. But if Roger Moore did that, you go, "Ooh, I don't like that."
Well, I remember him
do that for Connery, so Roger would have to do it in a different way.
I remember Mankiewicz talking on the commentary for Live and Let Die that there's a bit where Roger Moore goes into a bar in Harlem and great disguise Bond, and he said if that scene was with Connery, we would have to do it totally differently, because you would just immediately think, oh, he's going to have a fight. There's no way he's going to smooth this out.
There is that scene, isn't there? There's all these characters hanging about. You think, oh my God, and you think, poor Roger. You think, oh, he's had it here. But if that was Connery, you think he'd lay them all out. He'd do what Eastwood did in Coogan's Bluff. He'd go to the snooker table, get the snooker cue, and he'll smash. But Mankiewicz said to me that he was asked to, because he got on really well with Connery on Diamonds. They got on really well and became very friendly. And I think the producers asked him, have a word with Sean to see if he'll do Live and Let Die. And he took Sean out to dinner and said, Sean, you got to do Live and Let Die. It's great. It's got voodoo. It's got alligators. It's got boat chases. It's going to be great, Sean. And he went, no, thanks. But I love the way that Mankiewicz is saying, it's got crocodiles in it, as if Sean's going to go, oh, crocodiles, you say? I'm in.
One of the things that you were mentioning earlier was the fact that there's been a long hiatus, because with COVID, No Time to Die and the nature of No Time to Die, they knew that it's Craig's last film because they've killed him, and they finished filming it in 2020 it must have been.
It was a year delay, wasn't there?
There was a year delay to it being released, but even the moment they've written the script, they know, right, we should start thinking about a new Bond. We'll get this film done, but it should be, the conversation should begin now.
But I was told that was when he started in Casino Royale. This was the arc. I think that they knew that his final film, he would die. I think that was the story arc that he was told, or he brought to the table. I don't know.
Apparently, that's why
it was going to happen. It was always going to be that way. That's what I've sort of heard.
Well, I think I was perfectly fine with that. In fact, I think it makes perfect sense for it to be this kind of saga within the Bond universe, rather than a continuation of this is the same character that we saw in Dr. No. Somebody said to me that they thought of if you watch Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, and then you put License to Kill, Living Daylights and License to Kill in between Quantum of Solace, Spectre, then that makes like a complete career for Bond, if you like. There's a sort of a way of watching it. So they've had a long time. They've had a good 5 years where they've either known that they're going to have to find where they genuinely know they're going to have to find a new Bond. What is taking so long?
Well, I think it's the creative difficulties. I think because you've got Amazon now in control, haven't you, of the studio?
Right.
They bought up. They bought up MGM? Rumblings I've heard that Michael G. Wilson wants out. He's 83 now, bless him. You can't blame him. The last thing you want to do when you're 83 is travel the bloody world, trying to sort out things in Istanbul or Egypt or whatever, and deal with, irritating people. So he probably would like to sort of enjoy some kind of retirement. Barbara, obviously, the link to the family. She has the broccoli name, doesn't she? So she wants to sort of not keep it in the family, but she has a duty, doesn't she, to her dad? I think she must feel a real personal duty to the memory of her father. what her father created.
And she's only 64, so she's...
'Cause, I mean, I've heard rumours that they want to sell up and just sell it and be gone with it. But I think with Barbara, because of the personal things, I don't know if that she'll ever get rid of it. You know what I mean? It's like selling the family business, isn't it?
I mean, the fact that Amazon own it and the first thing they did with it was that ridiculous reality TV show.
I think that's what she's scared of. Whether she must have okayed that, but that's the route. I think that the lesson here is the way that Disney have dealt with Star Wars, have basically destroyed it. One could say certain woke decisions that have been made, but also if you deluge the market with this, with Star Wars this, Star Wars that, Star Wars this, people get sick of it after a while. It's too much.
I think that's much more relevant than any so-called wokeness, because I don't. Yeah. In a universe where you can have walking dogs,
I think the woke thing is important in fandom. I mean, you can go onto YouTube, can't you, and all these fan podcasts where they are talking about what's happening in the world of Doctor Who, in the world of Marvel, and all that kind of stuff. There is that argument within the fan community, which is interesting, but yeah, I agree as well. I think the main thing is they've overstuffed the market. If there was a Bond film every 6 months, you'd get sick of it after a while, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that a Bond film is always an event, it's always
absolutely
2 to 3 years, if not more, between them.
Because if you look at the early ones, Doctor No, Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, they came out once a year, didn't they? But only because they were, I won't say straightforward films, but I think only twice, because they were filming in Japan, and logistically that was huge. So they thought it's going to take 2 years for the next one to come out. And I think after that they must have thought, well, actually, we'll do it as every 2 years, because it gives space to make a huge movie, but also leave the punters wanting more.
Yeah. Create a market of scarcity, so that
absolutely.
Who would? So you've already said Aaron Taylor Johnson, is one of the names in the hat. There have been other names, but most of those names have kind of either aged out. Idris Elba, when he was first mentioned, I think that's a great call. Colin Salmon, I think, was a great call early on, but those guys have aged out, really.
It's like Henry Cavill as well. I think he's missed the boat, hasn't he?
Yeah, because you need to think that they need to have another 15. It's not how old they are now; it's how old they're going to be in 15 years.
It's also where their career is as well. I remember talking to Vic Armstrong, and he worked on a movie with Hugh Jackman, one of his first films. And he went back to the Bond producers and said, I think I'll just work with the next Bond, a guy called Hugh Jackman. And he's Australian, so that, perfect. And he said to them, this is the next Bond. And I think Hugh Jackman spoke as well that he would like. But once he started doing the X-Men films, he didn't need Bond.
That's only need one franchise.
Like you've got to get the actor in the right period in his career, because there comes a point where you don't need Bond anymore, because you've established your own career. Daniel was an interesting actor. He'd done a few, but he wasn't really an A-list actor, was he?
No, he was art movies and TV.
Indeed. So he, the decision to play Bond was a valid one. But if you're Hugh Jackman and you've just done Wolverine, you don't need to do a Bond film. You don't need to do James Bond.
So moving on to something which is Bond related but not entirely, you've got another book coming out about the Pink Panther series, which of course is another MGM property.
Absolutely, MGM UA, yes. There is a few Bond connections, actually. Obviously, Peter Sellers was in Casino Royale, wasn't he? And in my youth, there was an amazing double bill program. It was United Artists teamed up. Bond and the Panther, Spy Love Me, and Pink Panther Strikes Again was a double bill. And there's an amazing poster where you've got Roger Moore standing, holding the gun in typical Bond pose, and on his back, he's back to back with the Panther doing the same thing, holding a gun. It's a great poster. And also the teaser trailer for Revenge of the Pink Panther is the gun barrel. The real, and it's actually the gun barrel, because of course it's United Artists, so they've got the copyright to the gun barrel, so they were allowed to use it. So it's not like a pretend silly gun barrel; it's the gun barrel, and and Inspector Clouseau walks on, Peter Sellers, and in his just sort of white trench coat, and turns around and fires, and the blood comes down. I think that's on YouTube. If you want to hunt it down, it's quite amusing to see that. So, but yes, again, I think going to see a Pink Panther movie in the cinemas was like Bond. It was an event. The new Pink Panther movie. Family audiences. The whole family could go and see it. Like the whole family went to see a Bond film, and the whole family went to see a Pink Panther movie. They were sort of the summer or Christmas treat. In the 70s. And of course my name, my surname being Sellers, no relation, unfortunately, but my dad was a big Goons fan. So I've grown up with Sellers, watching his movies.
Maybe fortunately, if you've read any biographies of Peter Sellers, the children don't get treated so well.
Absolutely, yes. Sellers was, wow, yes, a strange man. There's a lot of stories in the book. So I interviewed a lot of people for the book who worked on it. He was a strange. There's one amusing story. He had the hatred of the colour purple and the colour green. So if he arrived on the set and anybody was wearing green or purple, he would go ballistic. He'd walk off, or he'd scream and shout. If the curtains were green or purple, he would throw a strop, and you wouldn't see him for days. And there's a great story. He was on set. And Julie Andrews, of course, was married to Blake Edwards, so she was around a lot on set. And Julie Andrews' mother arrived on the set to see the filming, to see Julie, and she was wearing a purple coat. And Sellers saw it and screamed like a banshee, and walked off, and he was gone for days. They couldn't find him for 2 days. And poor Julie Andrews' mother was saying, "What have I done to Peter Sellers? What, did he hate me?" This poor woman, he just screamed in her face like a banshee, like a lunatic, and stormed off the set, and she didn't understand it.
What a deeply unhappy man. It's so
Very
weird.
Because often is it a power play? Because a lot, all these stories about, these pop star divas who arrive, and they want certain things in their dressing room, don't they? They want certain kinds of sandwiches. The famous thing, isn't it? They just want yellow M&Ms. They don't want any other colour. They just want yellow. And a lot of that is not that they like yellow M&Ms more than red. It's that they want somebody going through loads of packets of M&Ms and just picking out yellow ones. It's power. I can make you do that. Yeah, and you have to do that. That's what it is. They probably didn't even eat it, but they just want the power to be able to make somebody do that. So was there an element of that with Sellers, that he wanted to keep people on their toes, as it were? Or was he just deeply? I think he did. He probably had be diagnosed with bipolar today, without a doubt.
What about? I mean, there's another interesting connection with Bond, which of course is the post-Sellers. They did try to sort of continue the Clouseau brand. You had Roberto Benigni and Alan Arkin both essay follow-on movies. Yeah,
and then Steve Martin, of course.
Of course, kind of successfully, I think. I mean,
the first one they only did two, but the first one was a hit. It was a genuine hit. It was very successful, which is why they did the second one, which wasn't so successful. They're very strange. Again, interesting. Who takes over from Connery as Bond? I mean, who takes over from Peter Sellers as Clouseau? Because he completely made that part his own. You couldn't think of anybody else. Can you think of anyone else who can play Clouseau but Sellers?
But then again, I mean, Dr. Strangelove is now showing in as a theatre piece with Steve Coogan.
But I think once you start making a series of films, you become so synonymous with that character that it becomes increasingly more difficult to recast. Alan Arkin did it in the 60s, didn't they? Because Sellers, they did two films. They did Pink Panther and then they Shot in the Dark. Do you know the horror film connection with Shot in the Dark? The guy who wrote the script for Shot in the Dark is Peter Benchley, who later wrote The Exorcist. William Peter Blatty, yes, of course. Yeah. Don't know why Peter Benchley came into my head. The latter stages of filming Shot in the Dark, Sellers and Blake Edwards completely fell out. And they would only talk to each other via messages sent by assistants. It's like, will Mr. Sellers kindly come to the set? And they tell Mr. Edwards that I will be there in half an hour, and that kind of thing,
Right. Right.
And they vowed never to work with each other again. So that was it. But the Mirisch brothers, who were part of a production company who were making the films for United Artists, wanted to carry on. They could see that this could be a series of films. So they carried on, and Inspector Clouseau came out with Alan Arkin. But they went to Sellers and they went to Blake Edwards and said, we are going to make another Inspector Clouseau film. Do you want to do it? And they said no. Sellers said no. 2 weeks before they started filming, Sellers phoned up Mirisch, the producer, and said, I hear you cast Alan Arkin. Well, I want to do the film. But they said, no, Peter, it's too late. They just knew it was a stall. You just didn't want the film.
It was a spoiler move.
It was a spoiler move, absolutely. Because they knew that's like doing another, like Connery walks out of Goldfinger and they cast somebody else, and then 2 weeks before Connery phones up and says, hang on, I've changed my mind, I will play Bond. And Connery says, too late, Sean.
Yeah.
It's a bluff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a poker move, but they thought Sellers, you don't really want to do it. You're just gonna he wants to see the script. He's gonna take months over the script, and he's just gonna destroy the film. So no, so they went ahead with Alan Arkin. Really weird choice, very strange choice. He doesn't quite pull it off. And then they came back 10 years later, 1974.
It's a long gap.
It's a long gap because they hated each other. They just didn't want to work together again. But they did, although in the late 60s, they did make a film together called The Party.
Of course, yeah, which is like a silent movie almost.
Absolutely, and I think Blake Edwards came up with the idea to do a film that literally was improvisational. There was no script. The whole film was all sort of improvised on the spot almost. And he thought, the only person I can do this with is Sellers. Sellers is the only person that can play this part. So they made the film. And they sort of gone on a little bit. And I think relations had eased by then. So by 1974, both of their careers were in the toilet. They had flop after flop after flop. And the idea was, well, we need a hit. So let's do another Pink Panther. And that was Return of the Pink Panther, which was a monster hit, of Harry Potter type. It was like the fifth biggest film in America. Jaws was number one. Then it was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Wanted Shampoo or whatever. And then it was Return of the Pink Panther. It was huge. It was a huge box office hit. And that sort of, the franchise was reborn. The Pink Panther Strikes Again, Revenge of the Pink Panther. And they're great movies. They're terrific films.
What's your favourite? Comedy
set pieces.
What's your favourite?
Huge budgets. I mean, a lot of money was spent. And a lot of money was wasted. There's one story. They were in Hong Kong for Revenge of the Pink Panther, and they're filming the villain's penthouse. So they used the actual penthouse of the hotel they were staying at, which was the Hilton in Hong Kong, and they took over the whole penthouse and the production team went in and they demolished one wall to make it completely all the way through. They completely redecorated, repainted. They took all the glass out. They had to get a crane on the roof to take out each pane of glass separately, and they put in natural density light glass so it would be easier for filming. Right. God knows, it took them about a week to do it. God knows how much it cost. And then when they were ready to film on it, Sellers said to Blake, I want to go home. I'm fed up of Hong Kong. It's too hot. I want to go back home. I want to go back to Pinewood. So they left. And they never filmed on it. So they had to put it back the way it was.
Wow.
God knows how much that must have cost. It must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. And they had to replicate it on Pinewood. So they had to build a huge set of Pinewood instead, because Sellers didn't want to be in Hong Kong anymore. They were in Nice on another film, on another Panther film, and they were filming. They found this perfect location for Clouseau's apartment, but unfortunately, it was on like the fourth floor of this apartment block. And Blake came up and looked at it and thought, "Fantastic, it's brilliant, but we can't film on it because Sellers just want to walk up 4 flights of stairs, so we can't use it. We'll have to do it back in the studio." And that went on all the time. That's just it. That was like a daily occurrence of things like that. Yeah, crazy.
I mean, and that was sort of like he was writing his check for those films. He was those were the films that he could definitely make money on. Whereas at the same time, he was doing sort of soft beds and hard helmets and stuff like that.
Yes. I mean, that was his cash cow, without a doubt. But I mean, his behaviour on it. I interviewed Peter Merton, who was production designer, and they were filming in Munich. But Peter had to fly back and forth from Munich to London like every few days to keep what was going on in the London studios, to keep an eye on what was happening. So he would fly back quite regularly. On the last flight, out of Munich to London. And on one flight, he got on the flight and he saw that Sellers was sat on the back of the plane. So what's Sellers doing here? He's on call tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. What's he doing on a plane to London? He didn't see each other, but so he sat down. And when he got to London, he phoned up Blake Edwards and said, Peter was on the plane to London. I said, what? He just walked off the set and just caught the plane back to London. Nobody knew he'd done that. You know, he was due on the set at 6 o'clock the next morning, but so after a couple of days, he finally went back to Munich and stuff. And the schedules went way over. I mean, they went weeks, months.
I mean, it's almost like he was a human experiment in how to get fired. You know, how far can I possibly go before someone will just say, look, I don't care how much money you make us, you're a pain in the arse.
Well, I think by then he was Inspector Clouseau. They couldn't make a Pink Panther film without him. So his behaviour on Strikes Again, Revenge was outrageous. And they had fun as well. They had great fun as well.
Give us a positive story then.
Well, I spoke to all the people like Diane Cannon and Leslie Ann Down, Elkie Summer. He got on really well with his female co-stars. They loved him. He was so generous. Like Catherine, they were filming in France, and their next location was Marrakesh. And Peter said to Catherine Schell, who told me that she said, "How are you getting there?" And he said, "Oh, economy. We're flying economy." He said, "No, you're bloody not. You're coming on my private Learjet, you know." And then where are you staying in Marrakesh? Well, I think I'm in with the crew. I think there's this B&B where no, you're not. You're staying at the Hilton with me, you know. So there's that element as well, you know. He was a weird guy. Catherine Schell told me that she was having lunch with her friends or dinner, and Peter Sellers came into the restaurant and said, "Peter, join us," and he joined. He joined them, and they hours telling them stories about Hollywood, and he was fantastic. He was telling all these wonderful anecdotes, and when the bill came, you know, Sellers went, "No, I'll pay. It's all on me." They had an amazing evening, and the following evening, again, they were in the restaurant. Peter came in. "Peter, join us." "Fuck off. Leave me alone." There's bipolar.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't get textbook, really.
Textbook bipolar, isn't it? Well, so one day he would be fantastic. The next day, you know, he would totally ignore you or be incredibly offensive and rude to you.
It can't have been fun to be Peter Sellers. I mean, that's what...
Well, how do you live with someone like that? How do you live day to day as a wife? How do you live with someone like that? I spoke to his personal assistant who was with him for the whole of the 70s, and she got a call one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. This is in London. Not during a film. I don't think he was filming at the time, but she got a phone call, and Peter said, "I'm." At the time, he lived in a block of flats near Victoria, and he said, "I'm outside. I'm on the balcony, and I'm thinking of ending it all. I'm thinking of jumping off the balcony and finishing it all." And she said, "Peter, stay there." She put the phone down. She got in the car. She raced to she banged on his door, and he opened the door. So, "Oh, thank God you're here. Can you go and get me a sauerkraut or a bratwurst sandwich at Selfridges? I'm really hungry." He just wanted company. He just wanted someone to come round and attend to him. Yeah.
But you still wonder if that's joking, not joking as well. You know what I mean? It's like, have I used a threat of suicide just to get myself a sandwich, or was I really thinking of committing suicide? And by the time you came round, I'd decided not to. And
no, I think no. It was he hated being on his own.
Yeah,
he hated being on his own. Catherine Schell said that after filming Return of the Pink Panther, she stayed friends with him for a long time. He would phone her up at again midnight and say, "Can you just come round?" And she would be there until he fell asleep. She would be on the bed talking to him, and when he fell asleep, then she'd go home. You know, he just needed company in those long, horrible, empty, lonely hours, you know, of midnight to 7 o'clock or something. You know, he'd fall asleep at 4 o'clock, and she'd go home.
So what's the name of that book? Because I've read the first chapter, but I haven't...
Yeah, I think it's The Secrets of the Pink Panther. They changed the title, actually.
And when's that due out?
I think it's coming out in the next couple of weeks, sort of late February, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm going to use that as your recommended book because you're writing so many. You're writing the recommended books as well as the books that we're talking about.
I can't do anything. People say, "Oh, you write all these books. How fantastic!" Because I can't bloody do anything else.
No, well, don't stop.
I mean, I wanted to be an actor. I went to drama school, That was the ambition. But I turned to writing because I like you, we love film.
Yeah.
So I couldn't be an actor. So I chose to write about film and acting and. So I'm in that world. I talk to actors, I interview directors and things. So
Well, I hope long may it continue, because I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into the Pink Panther books. I've got the box set upstairs, and it's well worth a rewatch. I think the Pink Panther movie.
I think they're great. I think they hold up quite well. I think they're a bit long. I think they probably. I don't think any comedy should be longer than 2 hours. I think 90 minutes is the perfect length for a comedy. These are all 2-hour movies, and they are a bit lengthy. But some of the comedy set pieces are the best in cinema. And I think Sally's performance as Clouseau, I think, is one of the great comedy performances. I mean, it's iconic. I mean, you've got an iconic character in Inspector Clouseau. You have an iconic character in the Pink Panther, the cartoon character of the Pink Panther. And then you've got the Henry Mancini music, which I think is up there with the Bond theme. One of the most recognisable pieces of film music ever.
And also, you've got those returning characters like, Burt Kwok plays,
Cato and
Herbert Lom,
Dreyfus.
Yeah, absolutely. Which are, in and of themselves, characters which develop and which become more interesting as the series progresses.
Very much so. Yes. The famous wink with the eye, which was complete accident.
Oh, really?
Yes, complete accident. I think he did it. He was filming the scene and he was winking a little bit. And Blake said, "What did you do there?" And he said, "Oh, sorry, I was just my eye was irritated." I was like, "No, I like that. Do it."
Right. Oh, that's
so that
good.
became his sort of trademark, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's amazing.
They said so. If a scene wasn't working or the dialogue wasn't very funny, Blake would say, "Do the eye bit. Do the eye bit."
I love the way that Blake Edwards sort of overlit all the scenes because he didn't know where Sellers was going to go, so he didn't want any of the set to be dark because or badly lit. He wanted it all brilliant. Robert, well, listen, I can't wait for your next book. I've got to finish the Pink Panther first, so slow down, and then I can't wait to have you on to talk about your next book.
No, thanks, John. Really appreciate it.